Good evening, this is Hound Steve wishing you a very pleasant evening. And I came across this article, and it is about why lockdowns and masks are not as effective as we are being told, and actually why they cause more damage than the good that they produce that we could ever get from them. I thought it was an interesting article. It covers a lot of topics. There are some charts in here for you to look at. So here we go. One of the most interesting CV commentators and an outstanding number cruncher on Twitter goes by a pseudonym so his life doesn't get ruined. You can follow him at Bobcaygeon. For today's installment, I have taken his most recent thread, edited it lightly for clarity, and reproduced it here. Global health policy in 2020 is centered around NPIs, non-pharmaceutical interventions, like distancing, masks, school closures, etc. These have been sold as a way to stop infection, as though these were science. This was never true, and that fact was known and knowable. Let's look. Above is the plot of social restriction and NPI versus total death per million. There is 0R2, which means that the variables play no role in explaining one another. We can see the same relationship between NPI and all-cause deaths. This is devastating to the case for NPI. And you can see that the R factor is 0.0126. Correlation is not proof of causality, but a total lack of correlation is proof there is no material causality. Barring massive and implausible coincidence, it is essentially impossible to cause something and not correlate to it, especially 51 times. This would seem to pose some very serious questions for those claiming that lockdowns work, those basing policy upon them, and those claiming this is the side of science. There is no science here or any data. These are the febrile imaginings of discredited modelers. This has been clear and obvious from all over the world since the beginning, and has been proven so clearly by May that it's hard to imagine anyone who is actually conversant with the data is still believing in these responses. Everyone got the same R curve. Lockdowns were a panic response. They came long after disease growth curves had rolled over and had no effect overall. It is clear when you plot Google mobility data versus disease curves, this is from May, the R2 was 0. This was all proven by May and strongly argued by April. This data is literally overwhelming. There is just no evidence that lockdowns work, and yet our media is complicit. Our media is complicit in this, in telling you, in supporting these political decisions, even though the World Health Organization, the CDC, has implored politicians not to go this route because of the damage that it does. Spain and the Netherlands had radically different responses, but got R, the basic reproduction number, curves that were all but indistinguishable. This issue crops up everywhere. Mitigation has zero effect. Similarly, there is no evidence that opening had any effect either. And this was all known. Every set of long-standing outbreak guidelines contraindicated lockdowns until this year, when we suddenly abandoned 100 years of science and started making stuff up and moralizing about it as though it were canon. Donald Henderson, who led the war against smallpox, wrote in 2006 that there are no historical observations or scientific studies that support the confinement by quarantine of groups of possibly infected people for extended periods to slow the spread of influenza. The negative consequences of large-scale quarantine are so extreme. Forced confinement of sick people with the well, restriction of movement of populations, that this mitigation measure should be eliminated from serious consideration. Let me just say that again. That this mitigation measure should be eliminated from serious consideration. Are you listening, politicians? The same is true of masks. Just last year, the WHO surveyed this and found that community masking does not work. Nothing has changed, and I will leave that link below. It is one of the studies on the CDC's website, and as I said, the CDC is one of the best places to go to find the information that contradicts what these people are actually saying in public. And now that it's becoming clear that asymptomatic spread is vanishingly rare, we can really put the final nail in the NPI coffin. This is the vector these interventions were meant to head off, but it was never a serious source of infection. The simple fact is this: nothing we have done has made any meaningful difference. CV is seasonal and regional. When your season comes, it comes. NPI is not why California and Peru and Eastern Europe did not get hit in the spring. It was just regional. Then your season comes and everyone moves together. We've been making baby oil for sunscreen in places where it was still nighttime. The noon came and it was revealed for what it really was. Croatia, for example, is open. No lockdowns, no curfews, no mask laws. Open. Life there is normal. People are trying to claim this is causing a CV spike. It's not. They look, gasp, just like every other country around them, most of whom are locked down, masked, etc. NPIs do nothing. This means that all this moralizing about you just want grandma to die and the censorship of evidence counter to the big lie that lockdowns work has been at best a disastrous mistake and at worst a cynical ploy to wreak havoc and cover past errors. Politicians are now doubling and trebling down on lockdowns and masks because to do otherwise is to admit that they brought us $10 trillion of sugar water as medicine and wrecked our lives and livelihoods for no sound reason. They will never do that, and of course we're seeing that. This is why they have shifted the debate to morality and censorship to mask the fact that science and the data calls them liars. Repeat, I'm on the side of science enough to scare people endlessly and you can generate social belief, but it's pure propaganda. These mitigations do not stop CV or to reduce overall deaths. This is the most expensive peacetime policy debacle in human history, and they all want to do it again. Say no. Stand up. This is not medicine, it's poison. This does not save lives, it wrecks them. It's easy to sell false hope to scared people. There are whole industries that prey on the desperation of parents with sick kids, but sometimes there is just not much you can do, however much you want to control and want to do something. This is one of those times. And we need to accept that. Many times the best way to do something is to do nothing. Something in this case has been an absolute disaster. We panicked into unprecedented global self-harm. It's time to stop. This is just making it worse. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that little article, and if you did, please like, comment and subscribe below. And in the meantime, this is Hound Dog Steve signing off, wishing you a very pleasant evening, and we'll talk very, very shortly. You take care now. Bye-bye.